Welcome to Philadelphia Wedding's First Look event, and congratulations on your engagement. I'm the editor of Philadelphia Wedding, and we're excited to share this insightful discussion featuring some of the area's finest vendors with you. Tonight, we'll be talking about tips, trends, and advice, and I hope you find their expertise and knowledge helpful as you embark on your wedding planning journey. Before we get into the questions, we'd like our panelists to share a little bit about themselves and their businesses. So up first, we have Andy Chilowski, owner, chief planner, and designer of Musa Weddings. Andy, take it away.
Hey, Kristen. Thank you so much, guys, for having me. I'm so excited. My name is Andy, and I am the owner and lead planner of Musa Weddings. We are a full planning and design company based out of Philadelphia, but just serving pretty much anywhere where we're needed.
Thank you so much. And now we have Afrique Armando, principal photographer and owner of Afrique Armando Studio.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm really excited to be here with you guys. My name is Afrique Armando, and I own a small photography business here in Philadelphia, and I specialize in making my couples look like kings and queens.
Up next, we have Laura Nichols, senior entertainment producer of East Coast Entertainment.
Hi, everyone. I wish we could be in person today, but thanks so much, Philly Wedding, for allowing us to do this. I think it allows the event access to more people than otherwise could see us in person. So it's a good trade-off there. So I'm Laura. I'm a senior entertainment producer for East Coast Entertainment. We specialize in wedding and corporate dance bands, but also provide small ensembles and everything from novelty to national in terms of entertainment. So we represent some of the most popular bands in the area: the Sid Miller Dance Band, Legacy, Blue Label, Modern Lux, The Morning After, The Red Hots, Cherry Crush, and Philly's Finest. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. I feel like dancing now.
Yeah.
We'll be providing a slide at the end of the panel with everyone's information so you can connect and further the discussion. Now let's jump into the questions. And if we don't address something, please feel free to add them to the chat feature and we'll try to answer your question in our thank you email. So let's start with the pandemic. It's obviously on everyone's minds, but guidelines seem to be shifting so quickly by the minute within Philly and beyond. The CDC even recently released new recommendations for people who are fully vaccinated. It really makes it a little complicated to be planning weddings. But what is the most important thing for newly engaged couples to keep in mind right now?
I would say that they should not be afraid of micro weddings. I know that some people have that stigma that micro weddings are less fun. The guests are not gonna enjoy themselves as much as maybe with a larger guest count. But I just wanna say that that's not true at all. Like, if people are gonna wanna have a good time, they're gonna have a good time no matter where, when, with who. So just don't be afraid of micro weddings. If this is the option that we have right now, still get married, still say I do, and just keeping in mind the most important part of the day, which is getting married to your partner.
I agree with her. I would say it has been complicated, but I think I can speak for most vendors is that we definitely see the light at the end of the tunnel, which is such a blessing. I think that the most complicated part is hopefully behind us, just with all of the movement and the rescheduling. And I see couples' confidence coming back in terms of large events, large dance floors. We're certainly excited. We have a massive year ahead of us, and 2022 is going to be even bigger. So I would say the most important thing is to remind couples is that you should have an open mind and envision your reception potentially happening in a couple different ways. I think that some people have a huge tunnel vision when they are originally envisioning their wedding. But you know what? We all are going with the flow. Vendors have adapted, couples have adapted, and just keep in mind things may change and might be okay. And trust in your vendors to make it fantastic regardless.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. I think keeping an open mind, and also if you have the ability to hiring a planner, I think if anything, this pandemic showed us the importance of planners and designers. I know all the weddings I was fortunate enough because most of my weddings in 2020 and 2020, the latter half of 2019 were all mostly planner weddings, and all of my couples decided to go with planners. And so I think planners, I can't overemphasize their importance and how they were able to manage the whole storm of just everything going on. So I think that would be my biggest thing is, try to work with someone who could help you make these things easier for you.
Definitely. Those are all such great comments. And I agree. We're going to talk a little bit more about micro weddings a little bit later, but open-minded, flexibility, planners are just a blessing right now as well. So thank you so much for all of that. I want to talk to you a little bit about etiquette as well. What do you think the new normal is in terms of wedding planning? For example, how far in advance should you book or change the date? Or if your vendor team recommends a different band for your background micro wedding or a second photographer, what should couples take into consideration? I don't know if Andy, if you want to jump in first.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I would just say, just roll with the punches. Just like Laura was saying before, just be flexible, have an open mind. Things have definitely changed. And I would say, for example, like for my couples, before we used to plan on sending invitations 3 months out, completely out of the door, right in the post office, and have a deadline of about a month or so before the wedding to get the RSVPs. Now that's kind of out the window because a lot of venues are not even considering any final decisions until like 2 months before the actual wedding, which puts them at kind of stuck for how many people am I actually going to be able to invite? Am I going to be able to send all the invitations that I printed? Who's actually going to be able to make it? Who's not? So all of those little things, just being flexible and just kind of just updating a few things here and there will make everybody's life so much easier. But I would say definitely like time frames for things like that have definitely changed, and it's okay. It's not a big deal. We're still getting our SVPs. We still have enough time to do everything. It's just that things have definitely changed for that.
I'm curious, Laura, what you have to say about, about booking bands and whatnot I'm curious to see how that's gone.
Sure. I would say it's been, I can't say there's a new normal because the new normal is that there's 4,000 different scenarios and how this can go. I mean, we'll continue. We'll probably say it a million times during this event that just be flexible, but it is really true. And what Andy said, I would say in terms of the band side, when your venue changes or your guest count changes, that may really affect what sort of music is appropriate for the event. So I would say if your vision or your request does not fully align with our suggestions, have a conversation. Don't feel, I would say most couples don't want a yes man. They don't want me to just say everything and anything is possible. What you want is for me to, work with your other vendor team, your planner, your venue, your caterer, if it is at a private estate, and see what's best for that setting. And we've been through so many different scenarios over the last year that you really should take the advice of your vendors because they're looking out for you. They're looking out for the best outcome possible. And that may be something with the same effect of what you were envisioning, but a different approach. So just be willing to have that conversation and say, the reason why I want it this way is XYZ. And I'll take that and say, how can I still execute that? But maybe with a little tweaks to make sure that it still fits what the new plan is.
Afrik, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you are actually thinking about moving your wedding, I think it's always important to let most of your vendors know ahead of time. So the sooner you're thinking about these things, and I was very fortunate because most of my couples do think about, the first thing when they're thinking about moving their date, and I'm beyond grateful for that, is reaching out to me like, hey, Afrik, we're thinking, just so you know, we're thinking about moving. Are you available for this date, that date, or this other date? And I have had a few instances where I wasn't able to move. And I always make sure I find another photographer, or I find someone else who can at least take my place or who I know will serve the couple to the capacity that I typically do. But I love everything everyone else said.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I do want to talk to you a little bit about vendor burnout. I know this last year has just been a whirlwind, and I feel like so many of you have, kind of gotten your footing, but, people are sending emails in the middle of the night and whatnot. How can couples be mindful of you and your needs as well?
So I would say just respecting the policies that you set from the beginning. Hopefully we are all being clear with our clients, how we work and how we do things. So they are on the same page from the very beginning and not any surprises later on. And I know it is a stressful time and weddings are so like emotionally invested, right? People think that they need an answer right away. And just because we want to try to like be, friendly and make it work, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to answer every single email or text at 2 a.m. So, just have that kind of system in place of at what time you answer your emails, at what time you answer your phone calls. And this is a lot easier said than done for me. But, if you are off from that weekend, actually take it off. It's just mentally, you need that time away every once in a while. And we're not in the medical field. We're not, nothing is that urgent or of an emergency that needs to be answered at 3 a.m. It can most likely wait until the next morning and just people be able to respect our time. We will serve them the best we can, but just respecting the work hours and just timeframes that we're giving them as much as possible.
Yeah, I think we've all probably been guilty of working longer hours when we're stuck at home too.
That's the
I know
hard
I
part,
have.
because they like separate work-life balance when your work is at home.
Yeah.
So it's definitely like it's in your phone, it's constantly in the palm of your hand. So how can you not check your
Yeah.
emails or your texts and reply, as soon as possible? So it's definitely a challenge, but I feel like we can all do a little bit better.
Laura Efri?
Yeah. I would say in terms of vendor burnout is a hard question. I would say if there is any vendor fatigue from the band side, it's definitely a little more so with our sales team. Our bands, on the other hand, are eager and cannot wait to get back out there. They are just scrapping at the doors trying to get back to performing, which is very exciting for couples. So you should be very excited with that. After all the paperwork and, we change everything and we make sure our sales team, they may be a little tired, but your bands are ready to go. I would say that in terms of how do couples keep in mind what our needs are? I really think it goes for couples, both couples and us. We have to gauge what is a priority. I do agree work hours need to be set a little bit just so nothing is really too urgent, but response time is also helpful on both ends in a lot of different ways. But there are ways to prioritize when it's holding a date, when you're trying to move a wedding and the couple is trying to balance the availability of 10 different vendors plus their bridesmaids plus their family. That's very urgent. But once I have that date set for you, give me a couple days to get you the paperwork, because we're just trying to prioritize things that I know you need what you need now in certain ways, but there are other things that can wait just to give us a little breather and a balance when it's needed.
Love that. I was gonna say, I think for vendor burnout, I would be thinking more about the planners, because I'm not gonna lie, I have the start of this year, I've been in California. I've been relaxing, chilling by the pool. So I think I'm one of the. I can't say for all photographers, but I know we have had it really easy, because I think. And I'm so grateful to most of the planners I know, because I know they have really taken on majority of the burden, and everything gets, they get hit with everything. So if vendors are not replying, or if everyone's not like getting back to them, typically the couple always beats on the planner. I tend to be the last person to get anything or, hear anything. So again, I'm so grateful to planners, but I think with our couples being more understanding and trying to put themselves in the shoes of the planners, they probably have about 25 weddings that they're all trying to move, or they're trying to figure out what's going on. So there is a lot of moving pieces. And, I was talking to a designer the other day, and she said, unfortunately, and she's made this clear to some of her brides who are trying to get married in May, they have not had a regular and normal experience, just because we're living in a pandemic, and it's very difficult to really, like you were saying, Andy, initially, it's like there are a lot of things, there are a lot of moving factors, there are a lot of things we don't know. There are a lot of things the planners don't know. So sometimes I think being a little more understanding of that situation, and then, like, we're all human. So, of course we want those responses quickly, but I think, at the same time, we have to be mindful that these are also people. These planners are small business owners, and a lot of them have, really suffered from the pandemic. So yeah, I think being understanding, and communicating and setting boundaries with the planners, I think is something every couple can do to be more mindful.
Definitely. I would think this year has made us all a little more compassionate and understanding of other people, because it's just been such a whirlwind, figuring everything out. I actually wanted to jump back and talk a little bit about paperwork. Laura, I know you brought that up a bit. I want to talk a little bit about contracts. I know it's not the most glamorous thing, but I I wanted to know what you think is really important for couples to know from a vendor's perspective when it comes to their contracts. I know there's a lot of talk about force majeure and the pandemic clause. I don't know if you want to touch on that at all.
I mentioned it, so happy to kind of elaborate there. I think that your contract should not be scary. It shouldn't be scary. It should be seen more so as an explanation of expectations. You should see it as a tool to make sure that you guys are on the same page between you and any other vendor. And I would say build a rapport with your vendor, because that rapport is just as important as this contract. Your contract is just to set the boundaries so that you guys know that you're what you expect the vendor to execute, and what the vendor expects you to understand if there are some plans that are going to change. So I would say we love our couples. We love each and every one of them. And I think that being able to relate to them really makes these conversations a little easier. They know they can trust us. They know that we have their back, but we're all human and we're all in this. We need to make sure that the business is still surviving and is going to give them the best product once their date comes around. So that's why these policies are in place, to just make sure that everyone can have the end goal that we're looking for.
I agree. That's great. Andy, if you want to jump in.
I would say, just kind of like with setting the expectations with the couple from the very beginning, when you have that discovery call with your vendor, the first thing that you should, well, not the first thing, but one of the first things that you should be asking for is what is your policy, your rescheduling policy, your cancellation policy. That's all going to be in the agreement that they're going to send you when they send you a quote. But it's nice to talk it out, because sometimes, there's a lot of legal terms in the contract that a lot of couples might be, kind of like a little scared, like Laura was saying, to just kind of like read and not fully understand. So I feel like that's a conversation that should happen in that very first call with that potential client or that potential vendor, just making it very clear from the very beginning, what is your policy before you even request a proposal.
Yeah, I love what you ladies just said. Laura, I think one thing you mentioned was that relationship with your vendors. I think that's really important and cannot be overemphasized, because I think a lot of people have lost a lot. And I've had some couples who are booking. So they had their wedding planned in 2020 and they had to reschedule. So they lost their initial deposit with a different photographer and had to book with me. And there's this whole, and that's so many couples right now that I have on the books. And a lot of them are just scared to lose money. And I think it's understandable, because again, everyone's been through a lot. So I think when you build that relationship with your vendors and and there's mutual understanding, I think it makes things so much better. For instance, in my business, with some of my couples who rebooked or who have moved their weddings to 2022, I had to charge them a rebooking fee and an additional cost to, the collection they decided to opt for, not because I'm this like salesy, crazy shark businessman who's trying to like cheat them and lose money, but it was none of that. It was just simple things like production costs and operations in 2022 are very different from 2021. For instance, the second shooter I'll be hiring costs more money in 2022 because again, there's a pay raise. The studio manager costs more money because again, I'm giving her a pay raise. equipment's going to be different. So when, you communicate these things with your couples, and, you couples, when like when you think about these things, then you understand that, okay, there is a reason as to why this, person's charging me more money. And at the end of the day, you're not losing, because all of us vendors want to make sure that you get the best experience. And even some of my couples who we weren't able to move forward, that their deposit was converted into a shoot and some prints. So I think, again, it goes back to that relationship. And at the end of the day, we vendors care about you. We love you. You are our priority. So we want to make sure that everything works out for you.
What you had to say about, vendors loving the couples that they work with, because it's so true. You're celebrating love, and you're there to help couples celebrate love. I think that's beautiful. And it's all about communication and having that open conversation. So now it's time for micro weddings. Andy, I know you talked about it a little bit, but I am the biggest champion of micro weddings. I think they're beautiful. Some of the weddings that I've seen that all of you have produced are just the most amazing things. What is the biggest benefit or challenge that you are seeing that couples who are planning today should know if they're thinking about doing a micro wedding?
So I think definitely the biggest challenge will be your guest list, right? So everything else comes together, finding the vendors, no big deal. But when it comes to like narrowing down to a certain amount of people that you are allowed or that you can safely have in a space, it has been a big challenge for at least my couples and what I've heard from other vendors' couples as well. Just to, especially like if you both partners have a huge family, like who do you cut? Who do you include? How do you make it work so the other people don't get offended? So, and I feel like what you were saying, Kristen, a lot of people have gotten a little bit more human in a way, just like understanding the situation, and we're all going through the same thing. It's not just something that the couple is experiencing, it's everybody. And they have been a little bit more understanding. That's what I have seen with the guests that have been able to be accounted for. But yeah, for micro weddings, that's definitely the biggest challenge that I see.
What about benefits? I don't know, Laura or Afrique, if you have any benefits you'd like, or a challenge, whatever you.
Yeah, no, I'd love to speak benefits, because I would say most of the challenges probably have to hand it to Andy. It's the planners, maybe the caterers, they have minimums. From the entertainment side, it really isn't difficult to create a micro wedding. I've actually enjoyed kind of designing the entertainment around what really works best for them. A stripped down version of a band, doing something a little jazzier or more indie, or something that works for them. I would say it's not necessarily a benefit, but something that's interesting about micro weddings is I do think that everyone who has envisioned a large wedding still envisions a large wedding. And I love that. We can see it because now that the CDC has kind of changed some restrictions, the phone rings off the hook for large bands, which is incredible. What I think that the discovery of micro weddings has done, and how all of our vendors have kind of had some experience with that now, it kind of plays to a certain small group of people that otherwise didn't really like the whole idea of the massive traditional wedding or a wedding of 200 or 300 people. And otherwise, because they didn't like that idea, just didn't want to get married, didn't want to have a wedding at all, get married, but maybe not have a big celebration, maybe just go to the courthouse. I don't know. But I think that they've seen these ideas develop and see some really cool, little niche ideas that could really play to their vibe or their taste, when otherwise just the large wedding really wasn't their thing. So I think it's kind of created an avenue for that group of people, which is really, really special, I think.
Yeah, there's something for everyone. Everyone, like you said, seems to think that it has to be the large wedding, but if you want a large wedding, it should be a large wedding. But if you're more comfortable in a smaller, group, that's also a beautiful thing, and you can make it beautiful. Afrique, I'm actually really curious, and this is just something I've really wanted to ask you. Doing micro weddings at home and smaller elopements and stuff, does that present challenges as a photographer with a smaller space, and how have you kind of navigated that?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I love micro weddings. I think they're amazing because the budget for florals, for instance, rather than servicing 32 centerpieces, you can focus on one giant, massive wow moment. And I think a lot of times they're more intimate and you have the best of your people together with you. In terms of the space, it is very challenging because, some houses are not well lit, or some, places are not as spacious as you would love to. But I think that is the beautiful thing of hiring a photographer who is well versed with what they know, because the thing with photographers is we can make anything look beautiful. I can take, you know what I mean? I can take a spoon and make it look incredible and make it magical in the worst lighting. Because again, it's all about like, we are very concerned and very focused on your love, and we want to tell your story. And a lot of times, even in the worst lighting, some of the most magical moments unfold, some of the most intimate, like the father with the bride, or, there's so much magic that happens in sometimes very bad lighting. But again, that's why you want to be sure that whoever you're working with has mastered what they're doing, because then they can, it's second nature for them to just say, oh, the lighting switched, let me switch the settings to the camera. So I don't know if that answered your question at all.
No, oh my goodness, that's amazing. That's such a great tip for couples as well. So in terms of knowing, what your photographer can shoot, do you suggest doing, research online, or just asking questions of the photographer? Like, I have this small room, I'm worried about the lighting. What do you think? Or can you
Absolutely, absolutely. I think asking questions, asking them for galleries, because a lot of times, so for instance, when couples reach out to me, I send them galleries with galleries of weddings I've done in spaces similar to their wedding.
Okay.
So if, let's say, I've never shot at Pafa, I would send them a wedding that was more artificially lit, just because I know the lighting, from the little I know about Pafa, the lighting there is, at night, it's not very natural. So I think asking them for galleries, trying to see a full, like, you need to see more of their work, not just the portfolio they have online, because it's easy. Anybody can shoot in the daylight. Like, if you give my grandma a camera, she will get you really great pictures. But it takes a master to be able to work with the worst of light. And that's why, side note, my personal opinion, I think New York photographers are better than California photographers, New York and Philadelphia, because we have sometimes very difficult lighting and spaces, but we make gold. Rather than, like in California, where it's like, oh my gosh, the sun, Yosemite. Like, if I had Yosemite every day, you know what I mean? Or lighting that was like more natural every day, like the photos would be, I would be best photographer in the world. But to work with lighting, which is close to impossible, and make magic out of that, I think that's pretty impressive.
That's great. As a former Californian, I can say that there was a lot of, similar lighting out there.
There is something I want to add, and if you don't mind, if I can add to this conversation. So when I think there is so much talk about micro weddings now, which is great. Something in addition to that we've had pop up that I don't think we've all seen in the past as much is the amount of just at home, private estate, private home weddings in general. I think we have more on the books now than we ever have in the past, which is wonderful. I think I understand why clients want to do that. I personally love a private estate wedding. I think clients have been nervous about the availability of venues, maybe the restrictions, indoor, outdoor, their ability to, or their access to an outdoor venue may not be possible. So they want control of the venue and want to have it at home. I would say that for our viewers, if you're watching this and you are planning to have an outdoor wedding, there are two things I want to say. One, you need a planner. You need a planner, you need a planner, you need a planner. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but there are just the things that the venue thinks of for you that you now have to think of for yourself, having it at your home. Your planner will help you through that. If you're still trying to have a large wedding at your home, you may need generators, you may need built-in bathrooms, you may need a bunch of just power sources and flooring and things that you're not really thinking of, garbage cans. There is so much that goes into a private estate wedding that you really need guidance on. And the other thing that I found was interesting about private home weddings is that, all of us vendors, we're always gauging what popular dates are versus off dates, off season, prime months, dates, etc. The first introduction that a client has to vendor availability is usually the venue. They look for their venue, they see what venues are available. If every venue they reach out to is available every date, they know it's, or certain dates, they know it's not a popular date. Or the venue gives them the gauge of, oh, wow, all these venues are available on these Saturdays. Here are the dates that are available, which are Fridays, which are off dates. So that venue is usually that screen that gives a couple the idea of what a popular date is versus an off date. And the reason why I mention that is because now that so many clients are getting married at home, I have so many calls for a prime Saturday this September that will have no vendors available because they didn't get that gauge first and they decided to have it at their home. They locked in a date. They're having it on a Saturday this September. And now they may not have a band. They may not have a photographer. They may not have any of the other availability they wanted. So that's just a long-winded way of saying, if you're having a private home wedding, I'm all for them. I love them, but hire a planner and make sure you feel out the availability for vendors all together before you lock that date in. It will make your life so much easier, and it will make sure that you still have the vendors that you want.
Jump in on that really
Yes,
quick.
I was hoping you would.
Yeah.
No, I absolutely love what you said, Laura, and I completely agree. It's just like couples don't know what they don't know, right? They don't plan a wedding every weekend. They have no idea what's entailed. So, and for the biggest misconception that I have seen when I have couples reach out and say, we're getting married at my property or at, my parents' state, wherever it is that they feel like they can reduce their budget just because they're doing it at home, without knowing all of the things that you just said, Laura. Like, do you need flooring? Do you need a tent for plan B? Do you need restrooms? Because maybe the 2 restrooms downstairs are not going to be enough for 200 people. Do you need lighting to make sure that the path is lit when people are leaving in the middle of the night? Do you have enough parking? Is the kitchen large enough to accommodate a full catering? So the electricity, it's a lot of things that a venue already has in place and that your home doesn't. So that can either, completely make or break the budget, and in a really bad way if you're not prepared for it, if you're not thinking of it ahead. So definitely a planner is like a must have when you're doing it, even though you think that you're resourceful and that you can find all the vendors, but there's just a lot that happens just besides your photographer, your video, your music. There's a lot more involved than that.
I'm actually curious about what you had to say about budget and backyard weddings. Are you finding that they're more expensive than venues, or does it just fluctuate?
It fluctuates, but I do think that it can get carried away pretty quickly. Like it can go up very, very quickly. Let's just put it that way. Just because of all those things, right? If you have a venue that already has a seasonal tent up, and you don't have to pretty much account for it, and it's X amount of money to get into the venue for rental. Once you really look for pricing for tenting, for flooring, for restrooms, for lighting, you're going to notice very quickly that it's pricey. And then you have to bring 10 chairs and tables and all of the service tables and the linens and all the flatware and glassware and service and all that list is kind of like, it's a whole laundry list, right, of items that you're like, shoot, I didn't even think about that, because obviously you have this space, but that's about it. So just to get everything conditioned for a wedding, if you don't want to just make like a barbecue wedding in the backyard, great, that's perfect. But just have in mind what your end goal is. If it is a nice upscale wedding, there's going to be a lot of money involved, most likely, depending on the amount of people that you have. But usually budgets are a little bit higher for that. Mm-hmm.
Budgets are obviously one of the most important factors of planning your wedding too. So
Yes.
I'm glad we were able to touch on this a little bit. All right, so I want to switch topics a little bit here. Over the last year, this, as I said, it's been just such a whirlwind of a year. We've all been working to be more conscious and intentional in our lifestyles. And I think weddings is definitely a huge part of that, from diversity in vendors to sustainable choices, just to being conscious of our guests and accessibility. How do you think couples can be mindful of this as they begin planning their big day?
I guess I'll go first. So I feel like if you want to just try to be a little bit more green, right? Just have a greener wedding. Just little steps. It doesn't have to be like full blown, worried about every little detail in your wedding being sustainable or just, environmental friendly. But you can take little steps. So maybe like asking your florist to try to avoid using those green foams where they put up the floral arrangements. It's really bad for the environment if you guys didn't know that. It's awful. It's so just trying to use a florist that either completely eliminates that from their process or requesting the florist that you're using to see if they can step away from that. Maybe asking your caterer to use more sustainable items for disposable ware, or just try to stay away from disposable ware at all. Like just use all reusable items in china and flatware. But there are ways that you can do a little bit to just kind of help and make it a little bit green or event.
It's less wasteful is a good way to think about it, I think.
Exactly.
I don't know, Freak, if you want to jump in, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I was gonna say I had a friend. He passed away 2 years ago, but for his wedding, yeah, it's this guy. For his wedding, he had a giant celebration. It was like a huge party. I think there was almost 500 people at the wedding. But for the favors, instead of getting an actual physical gift, they did for everybody. They did a donation. So for everybody who came, I think they donated, I think $10 per person, and that was the favor you got. I thought that was a really nice touch. I think things like that are always very mindful, and donating your flowers too. I know Forget Me Not does something like that where she could, she takes your flowers, give them to nursing homes or different places. I think those are ways to be really mindful about how you can make the world a better place with your wedding.
I love that. I love that. Laura?
Yeah, I'll touch on a couple of things. One thing you mentioned is diversity. I think that that's been on our minds a lot this year in a great way, and it's hard to know exactly how a couple can be more conscious of it. But I would say do your research, because a lot of companies have been looking internally and making sure that that's a priority of theirs. You're lucky that you're part of an organization like Philadelphia Magazine, or just following them, who makes us think about these questions and does their vetting to make sure they're working with vendors that are keeping these things in mind. So I would say do your research and just see what's important to you, and make sure that that is reflected in the vendors that you book. And that also has to do with sustainability as well. I think that we get caught up in excess in every category. And sometimes it is a little bit hard to avoid, because every category, every vendor of the industry has incredible things to offer to go above and beyond and max out the next wedding. I would just say every couple should have a priority list, know what is most important to you, what's going to be most memorable, and what you want to put your money towards, and know that you're going to remember. And that can kind of help you decide, okay, maybe can do without this element or downsize this element, even though it's okay to go all out in another category. So just see what you're going to remember, see what you're going to value for years and years and years, and just try to focus on that a little bit.
We touched on a bit of that in the latest issue of Philadelphia Wedding, and I think it's just such an important, thing for couples to know. Like, you can get a crazy dress, but then you can do something else, to donate your flowers or something. It's what is most important to you, and I think that was all beautifully stated. Thank you so much. Please share how you think weddings will change over the next year.
I feel I'm kind of torn on this answer, just because it can go both ways, right? It could go either a lot of people realizing how great micro weddings are, and just be able to realize, hey, I can do a great wedding, put tons of details, and to make it so unique, so personal, all those Pinterest details that I've always wanted, now I can afford if I reduce my guest count, and just really focus on what's really important of that day, which at the end of the day is that you're getting married, and that's, putting the effort more into the ceremony itself rather than the reception, or worrying about, how many people can I have and putting up this, larger event. Or it could be where we're all so desperate to get out there that it's just like a huge celebration, and we're all desperate to just like make it all, throw the house out the window and just make it larger than life. So I'm not sure on that. You can go both ways, I think.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Efreek, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I love what you just said, Andy. I think if anything we've learned from the pandemic is the fragility of life. The fact that we are only here for so long. I think that's something which we've been made more aware of. You don't like, as much as I'd like to think I have the whole I'm immortal and I'm gonna live forever. I mean, I already noticed like I have gray hair and like I'm aging. And I think when you think about your events, like Bay of War said, how do you get people to be more mindful, to go beyond, sure, the flowers are beautiful, everything looks amazing, but if you notice, when you've been to even just your daily interactions, a lot of times we don't remember certain details, but what we remember a lot of times are the interaction, the personal interactions we have, the deep conversations. How do you get your guests, especially now that they've been so isolated, to talk to each other? Could you do something where it's like maybe collecting all their phones, or like, how do you get people to have more deeper and meaningful conversations, to be more present, to be in the moment, to not have these little beautiful things on their hands and checking everything, Twitter or Instagram? Like, how do you get people to be more in the moment? I think that would be something which, moving forward, I think it's, because even now, like at the weddings, a few weddings I had the opportunity to do, you could tell that people were excited to be physically together. And a lot of times I did notice the shift in people not being on their phones all the time, but actually talking, safely talking in their little pods, but interacting. I think that's something which, you as a couple, how do you get your guest to have more of an experience? How do you create this moment? Maybe games on the table, like how do you get them to talk to each other? I think that's something which it will be exciting to see. And, you as a couple, I would love to see, or, the planners and we in the wedding world would love to see how you take this experiential design, the design beyond just the physical aesthetics, but more richer, deeper connections.
Yeah, that was beautifully said, and a good segue into me and my totally unbiased opinion. the dance floor, I think people do underestimate what the power of a dance floor really is, and a lot of people just see it as, people drink a lot and get crazy on the dance floor, but it really is so important to so many of our couples. And a lot of our couples has said, I'm glad I can kind of gather, have a smaller wedding, but it really bums me out that I can't have a dance floor. And that was in 2020. It luckily is coming back now, but I try not to be biased in saying that how you experience the band or the DJ and the dance floor and really celebrating that matters so much to how you experience your wedding in total. How do I think weddings will change? I also agree with everything that Andy and Afrik have said, in that there will be micro weddings, and I think also people will be just bawling out because they're so excited to just go crazy with a massive wedding, but also do some intimate celebrations. One little fun or interesting tidbit is that we actually have a group of couples that have rescheduled before. All of us have these couples that have rescheduled maybe once or twice and now have their big celebration scheduled for later this year, but actually decided to already get married on their original date. So they had something intimate, and now they'll just be doing a big blowout celebration. It's interesting. I think it will change. They may not do their introductions. They may not do a first dance or parent dances or speeches because they may have had those moments intimately when they originally got married. So I think people are ready to connect again. People are ready to have fun and engage and dance and just be connected again. And that's going to happen with our vendor relationships with our couples. We'll be able to see them in person again and just enjoy that moving forward.
That's so true. It's going to be so refreshing to be able to get on a dance floor and, speak to people in person and I think weddings, it's just going to be a wonderful celebration of love moving forward. And I think you all had just wonderful things to say. And thank you so much for that. And that about wraps up our Q&A session. And again, I just said it 3 times, but I'd like to thank our incredible panelists again, the team at Philadelphia Wedding, and our sponsors, PGP Wedding Films and 15-Minute On-Site Response, for collaborating on this with us. And before we finish, we'd like to provide some final details for you. If you're interested in submitting your real wedding when it happens, your proposal story or your engagement photos, or a compelling love story for our Real Talk section, please do check out phillymag.com/submityourwedding. We give you all the how-tos on how to submit and what we're looking for. We take online submissions on a rolling basis, and then I'll begin prepping for the upcoming print edition, the winter spring 2022. It's mind-blowing to say that. I'll be prepping for that in May, so that'll be coming up shortly. And we're always seeking a diverse cross-section of Philly area couples and vendors for print and online coverage, and I encourage you to take a look at those submission tips. So again, I want to say thank you for attending and congratulations again on your engagement. And I know our panelists agree. We're so excited for all of you. We'll leave today's panelists' contact information on the next slide for a few moments, and please feel free to screenshot, tag us, and reach out if you have any further questions. So cheers to you and happy wedding planning.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.